Portrait of an Artist, Vincent van Gogh.
Students, do you like to paint? Do bright colors captivate you? Today we'll read and understand this biography of a celebrated artist whose paintings are noted for their intense color and brightness, but whose own life was shadowed in poverty.
My house here is painted outside in the yellow of fresh butter, with garish green shutters, and it's in the full sun on the square, where there's a green garden of plane trees, oleanders, acacias. And inside it's all whitewashed, and the floors of red bricks, and the intense blue sky above. Inside I can live and breathe, and think and paint.
Thus wrote Vincent van Gogh to his younger brother Theo. Van Gogh was one of the greatest painters of all time, who exerted a powerful influence on the development of modern painting styles. He is celebrated today as one of the key figures of the 19th century post-impressionist movement in art. Yet, fame eluded him in his lifetime. During a brief artistic career spanning a decade marred by poverty and mental illness, he sold only one painting. His parents often worried about him, and Theo helped him with small sums of money all his life. But after his death, his finest works were all sold in less than 3 years. Early life. Van Gogh was born on 30th March 1853 in the Netherlands. His father, Theodorus van Gogh, was a clergyman, and his mother, Anna Cornelia, was the daughter of a bookseller. Vincent was the second of 6 children. He grew up in a strict household, and his early years, when he was sent off to boarding school, were unhappy. But he had already begun taking an interest in art. He left his studies at the age of 15, and a year later joined art dealers Gogh & Company as an apprentice in The Hague. After 4 years, he was transferred to the firm's London branch. He did well at work here, but soon developed a dislike for art trading. In 1876, while working at the company's Paris office, he was dismissed for expressing his resentment at his bosses for treating art as a mere commodity to be bought and sold. In the following years, Vincent drifted from one profession to another. He worked as a teacher in England and was briefly an assistant in a bookshop in a Dutch town. In 1879, he became a preacher in a mining community in Belgium, living frugally and even giving his possessions away to the local coal miners until the church dismissed him because of his over-enthusiasm. But it was here, while living among the working poor, that his artistic vision took shape, becoming an artist. In August 1880, while continuing to live in Belgium, he decided to formally become an artist. He studied on his own for a year and then set up a studio in The Hague in the Netherlands. He sketched using pencils or charcoal sticks and also used watercolors. Much of what we know about Van Gogh today, including his works on art, comes from the letters he exchanged with Theo. It was Theo's unfailing support which allowed Vincent to devote himself entirely to painting. Their surviving correspondence, which includes 640 letters, began in 1872 when he was 19 years old and continued throughout their life. In December 1881, at the age of 28, Vincent wrote about becoming a painter.
Theo, I'm so very happy with my paint box, and I think my getting it now, after having drawn almost exclusively for at least a year, better than if I had started with it immediately. For Theo, with painting, my real career begins.
He lived and worked in the Netherlands till 1885. He considered himself to be an artistic spokesman for the poor and the disadvantaged. He observed their lives closely and depicted through still life, landscape and figures, the daily life of peasants, the hardships they endured, and the countryside where they cultivated the fields. In 1885, he produced what is thought to be his first masterpiece, The Potato Eaters, a painting of a peasant family eating potatoes for dinner. To Theo, Van Gogh wrote,
I've tried to bring out the idea that these people eating potatoes by the light of their lamp have dug the earth with the self-same hands they are now putting into the dish, and it thus suggests manual labor and a meal honestly earned. When I say that I'm a peasant painter, that is really so. I've spent so many evenings sitting pondering by the fire with the miners and the peat cutters and the weavers and peasants here.
Theo encouraged Vincent and tried to sell his paintings, but they had few takers. Vincent spent most of the money Theo sent him on paint, canvas, and to pay his models. He often didn't eat properly, surviving for months on just coffee and bread. Paris. During this time, Theo wrote to Vincent to tell him about a new style of painting gaining popularity in Paris. This was Impressionism, a 19th century art movement where instead of broad strokes, artists applied paint in small touches of pure unmixed color to paint landscapes, people, and cafe interiors. The Impressionists painted in vibrant, bold colors and tried to capture the object as realistically as possible. They often painted outdoors to catch the natural light. In 1886, Van Gogh moved to Paris, at the time an exciting modern city, where literature, art and music thrived. He was influenced by the Impressionists, including Claude Monet and Edouard Manet, and began using brighter colors in his own paintings. He also became friends with the artist Paul Gauguin. Van Gogh painted swiftly and was prolific, producing over 200 paintings during his time in Paris. He painted subjects from the Parisian streets and cafes and the French countryside. He also painted portraits, and when he could not afford to hire models, he would paint himself for practice. He painted over 20 self-portraits in this period. Theo wrote of his penury to their mother in 1887.
Vincent has painted a few portraits which have turned out well, but he always does them for no payment. It is a pity that he does not seem to want to earn something, for if he did, he could make some money here.
But Van Gogh soon tired of city life. He wanted to leave the bustle of Paris and its harsh winters. 2 years later, he moved to Arles in the south of France, where he hoped to found a community of artists. Arles. Vincent loved the rich colors and the bright sun of Arles and rented a house there. He invited Gauguin to join him. To decorate the house, he painted one of his best-known series of paintings, Sunflowers. Van Gogh produced hundreds of paintings in all, sometimes painting masterpieces in a single day. But Van Gogh and Gauguin soon began to quarrel. One night after another argument, Gauguin left the house, following which Van Gogh is said to have severed his left ear. This version of events has, however, been doubted by researchers in recent years. After the incident, he committed himself into a psychiatric institution in Saint Remy near Arles. He also painted self-portrait with bandaged ear, one of his most recognizable paintings today. In Saint Remy, he used the surrounding olive trees, cypresses and cornfields as the subject of many of his paintings. In the following 2 years of his life, which were to be his last, he produced many of his best-known works. They are characterized by swirls of colors, most recognizably in Starry Night. In the year he spent at Saint Remy, Van Gogh created over 100 works, including irises and the Wheatfield series. These show an artist at the peak of his powers. Irises sold for $53.9 million in 1987. Van Gogh had always worked with a sense of urgency, and in the months before his death, he is said to have made one painting a day. On 28 July 1890, 2 months after he left Saint Remy, Van Gogh committed suicide. He was only 37. Theo rushed to be at his brother's side during his last hours. Van Gogh's final words were reported to be, "The sadness will last forever." Theo, his own health broken, died 6 months later. Today, the two brothers lie buried side by side at Auvers-sur-Oise near Paris with identical tombstones. About a week after Vincent's death, Theo wrote to his sister Elizabeth about Van Gogh's artistic legacy. In the last letter which he wrote me, it says,
I try to do as well as certain painters whom I have greatly loved and admired. People should recognize that he was a great artist, something which often coincides with being a great human being. In the course of time, this will surely be acknowledged, and many will regret his early death.
Van Gogh's mother threw away a number of his paintings during his life and even after his death. It was thanks to Theo's wife, Jo Van Gogh Bunga, that the world knows of Vincent today. Jo, who had always believed in Vincent's talent, collected all his paintings. In 1901, a landmark exhibition of a selection of these paintings in Paris brought him to the fore again. In 1914, she published a landmark 3-volume edition of the Letters to Theo. The letters speak of his journey as an artist and are a touching record of a man who struggled to live while being true to his beliefs.